Hi, I'm Helen, and I'm a first Q here at USAMA. As a first Q, I've been assigned a project that will demonstrate my knowledge of karate. In this video, we're going to discuss different aspects of senpaing and give tips on how to be a better senpai. Please note that the following tips are just our favorite and most important points to cover, and there's a lot more to senpaing than just this following list. Let's start by talking about what a senpai is and what that word means. The definition of a senpai, as we understand it, is the highest rank in the dojo, including black belts. At our dojo, we adhere to a looser interpretation of this definition. In many traditional karate dojos, there's only one senpai, and that would be the highest ranking student who is not a black belt. At USAMA, we have many senpais because we want all advanced students to begin developing their teaching skills early on, so that they're prepared to be a sensei. And the only real way to learn how to be a sensei is through senpaing. At USAMA, we define a senpai as a high-ranking student. Once you earn an advanced belt rank, you become a senpai, and you're a senpai to anyone who is a lower belt rank than you are. Having senpais creates a middle ground between the students and the sensei. Because the senpais are still students, it makes them more relatable to the younger belt levels. Having these senpais provides more opportunities for the students of the dojo to form relationships with other members of the dojo. These relationships will often add to the positive dynamic of the dojo and will create a better learning environment. Senpais relate and act differently towards the students than they would towards the sensei or towards each other because they know that the students are in a different part of their journey. In these three boxes, you can see three basic relationships that are formed by senpais in the dojo. The first one is the senpai and senpai relationship. Senpais are able to relate well to each other and help each other become better teachers when they form relationships with each other. Another relationship formed is the relationship between senpai and student. Senpais add depth to their martial arts education and give them a variety of different teachers. Lastly, the relationship between senpai and sensei creates a good line of communication between the head of the dojo and the people who are helping to run the lesson. There are a lot of reasons why senpaiing is important in martial arts. First of all, it gives higher-ranking students an opportunity to practice teaching before they actually become a sensei. Also, when senpais can take over teaching, it gives the sensei an opportunity to watch the students' progress as they are interacting with the senpai. Lastly, it benefits the students because it allows all students to have different teachers with many different teaching styles, so they'll get a better, more rounded martial arts education. In the following slides, we will be discussing certain traits that make a successful senpai. Martial arts skills are extremely important when senpaiing because you have to be sure you're teaching the student the techniques correctly. If you don't teach correctly, you're doing more harm than good, so if you're unsure about something you're teaching, always check with the sensei. The best way to improve your senpaiing is to keep practicing the basics regularly so the skills aren't rusty when you teach them. Having a positive attitude is important because of two main things. Your positive attitude makes the lesson fun. If the senpai is in a bad mood or seems like they don't want to be there, the students will not have fun. Also, a good mood is contagious, so if you have a positive attitude, the kids most likely will too. As a senpai, you need to be adaptable. Because sometimes you plan an activity and it won't work out like you planned it, or the kids won't understand it. In this case, you'll need to be able to change up your plan to suit the students' needs. Also, there are many different students in the dojo and they each have their own unique personalities that you'll have to take into consideration when you're senpaiing. As a senpai, you have to have some understanding of different learning styles because every student learns differently. You have to plan your lessons in a way that suits the student, and you have to know how to change a lesson so the student can understand it. As a senpai, it's important to know all of the character traits and apply them to how you act in the dojo. Many of them apply to senpaiing, and you need to keep them in mind to help make your lessons successful. For example, decisiveness is always important when you have to figure out the best way to teach your lesson, and compassion is important when a student is having difficulty learning the techniques. When senpaiing your students, you need to be motivated and have a desire to teach. Some people aren't natural teachers, and that's okay, but on our journey to black belt, everyone needs to learn to teach well. You need to be motivated when senpaiing because if you aren't motivated, your students won't be either. Students will learn faster when they're excited about what they're learning. Now I'm going to list a couple of general tips that are very useful when senpaiing different kinds of students. You have to be able to plan your lesson differently for kids with different learning styles, so having some of these guidelines in mind is helpful. Number 1, keep the students active. Doing your best to keep all your students active is important because when they aren't doing anything, their mind wanders, and they aren't really present in the activity. When this happens, they aren't learning anything and you aren't succeeding as a senpai. Number 2. Sandwich the lessons with fun activities. This will keep the kids engaged and having fun, which is an important part of Sempaing. For example, if you've been talking about head blocks for a while, maybe bring out some blockers and let the students test their moves in a way that's more fun so that they stay engaged. Number 3. While sandwiching fun activities with the lesson is important, it does no good for you as the senpai if it doesn't apply to the lesson. Going back to the previous example, if I've been talking about head blocks for a while and then I have the students running around playing with foam balls, that won't help the lesson, it'll just distract the kids. Instead, I should do something that applies to my lesson, like using blockers or putting a timer around their neck and using that to make the lesson more fun. And in that way, I'm engaging the students and they're still learning. Number 4. Disguise repetition. Students will get bored really fast if you have them doing head blocks over and over for 45 minutes. You will have the most success with the students and they'll learn the most when you disguise the repetition. For example, if you're doing punches, do some punches in a forward stance, do some on your knees, or do some on the punching bags. If you keep switching it up, by the end of the class, the student has done 100 punches, but they never got bored because they did it in a lot of fun ways. Number 5. Use the ready and attention positions regularly. This especially applies to newer students because it's good for them to get used to using these positions all the time. It also helps the student recognize when are appropriate times to use them in class. Number 6. As a senpai, you must be approachable. This one can be hard because the other senpais are your friends, and it's tempting to want to hang out in a group. However, when you hang out in a group like that, it can be really hard for a student to want to approach you and ask you for help. Students need to feel comfortable approaching you when needed, so don't form big groups of senpais. Number 7. Always stay on task. I can assure you that if you aren't on task, your student will not be on task. The purpose of coming to the dojo is to train, and that needs to be your priority. Also, the sensei wants you to teach students certain things for a reason. If you're supposed to teach a student Kihon 1, and instead you're chatting or messing around, the student won't learn and you will not have succeeded as a senpai. Number 8. Be a good example. I think this is the most important one because students like to copy you, and we don't want them copying bad behavior. Students look up to senpais because they hope to be a senpai someday. So, if you're messing around, it'll lead to us having an entire dojo full of students that don't know how to act appropriately in the dojo setting. It's a senpai's job to show them how we're supposed to act in the dojo. Quickly, we will go over a few things you should never do as a senpai. I hope that most of these are obvious, but reviewing them is always good. First and foremost, never be violent with students. I can assure you that will never do you any good. Also, avoid overcorrecting because students can only hang on to a certain amount of information in one lesson. You should never neglect the dojo rules or etiquette because students will like to copy you, and we don't want them to learn that it's okay to break the rules in the dojo. Don't train too roughly with the students. Training too roughly with them will just scare them, and they won't learn anything if they're scared of getting hurt or they don't trust you. Lastly, don't argue with students. You're the senpai, and you should be in charge. Arguing with them will completely destroy your authority. If a student is arguing with you, your best option is to talk to the sensei about the issue. Now that we've covered how to be a good senpai, let's discuss why we want to be a good senpai. Part of learning martial arts is learning leadership skills, and the way you develop those is through senpaiing. The qualities of good leadership are essentially the same as those you will need to be a good senpai. You need to be an enjoyable teacher, because people won't follow you if they don't enjoy being taught by you, and that's why we want to be good at senpaiing. This is always good to remember when teaching, because it's motivation to teach well and get good leadership skills so you're prepared to be a sensei someday. Finally, let's sum it all up. We spend a lot of time teaching other students so that we can learn how to be a good teacher, and eventually become a good sensei. Personally, I've really enjoyed learning to be a good leader, and I'm excited to keep learning more about teaching. And I hope that other senpais to come can learn to love it as much as I do.